Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. Before we all start, just want to let you know that my first ever full-length fantasy novel titled To Kill a Dragon, now available on Amazon. Links in the description below, but if you want to pick it up, maybe give it a read, maybe drop a review. After all, if I'm dishing it out, gotta be able to take it too. I'd be incredibly grateful. But now on to the subject at hand, the album that so many of you have requested, the newest record from Little Mix, titled Get Weird. But first, let's return to the subject of competition. Now, those of you who've been watching since earlier this year know that I opened up my review for Fifth Harmony with the same topic. And that's not a coincidence, because if we're looking for a classic example of Simon Cowell playing label mates against each other in order to spark up some very lucrative controversy, it's here. After all, it's a proven formula. The younger, more American accessible group going against the older, more refined group that's achieved worldwide success. It's NSYNC versus the Backstreet Boys all over again. And as such, it shouldn't be a surprise which one I would consider the superior group. And this shouldn't be much of a surprise to any of you. Back when I covered Little Mix's Salute last year, I was startled how much I ended up really liking it. With the girls having some solid chemistry, pretty decent vocal arrangements, and some real talent, and working with good writers while having a solid writing presence themselves on that album. Hell, their song Competition was exceptionally close to landing on my year-end list for my favorite songs of 2014. Why it wasn't a single, I have absolutely no idea, especially considering it would have wiped the floor with Fifth Harmony's Worth It, a song that for some ungodly reason became a hit playing in a more derivative template. Now, look, I don't want to oversell Salute, because it had its fair share of problems, most notably in the production and instrumentation, which tried to retrace 90s pop R&B with some mixed results. It could really have benefited from a budget or a cohesive production team like Girls Aloud had with Xenomania, which might as well be the tagline reviewing any album from Psycho Music, their label. So thanks for that, Simon Cowell. So as such, I had slightly mixed emotions going into Get Weird, Little Mix's third record. On the one hand, giving them a guest appearance from Jason Derulo smacked of desperation for a US crossover, and I had no faith whatsoever that Simon Cowell was going to give them some real production to make them stand out. As much as this album title promised that they would get weird, I didn't buy it for a second. On the other hand, I found some writers when digging through the liner notes that were really promising, and there was still a core of real vocal talent behind these girls. So I gave Get Weird a chance. How does it hold up? Well, it is slightly more peculiar than I would normally expect. Back when I reviewed Salute, I made the prediction that Little Mix would probably pivot towards R&B, which would make sense given the current climate and modern pop and given their vocal tones. But while Get Weird flirts a little bit with that idea, this album falls much closer to straightforward girl group pop music, reaching back even past the obvious Spice Girls comparison to girl groups of the 50s and even the 60s. So does it hit the sweet spot for me like Girls Aloud did? Well, not quite. But in refining and expanding the pop formula, Little Mix pulled together something better than I really expected. And for the most part, this works for me. This is pretty damn good. So let's start with the girls themselves. And let's make this clear, there isn't a weak link among them. And they show up different sides of their personalities that allows each member to have unique facets and personality. Harry's probably the standout with the best range and the most visceral presence. Again, she could probably do pop rock if she wanted to, with Jessie playing softer, more girlish tones, and Jay with a higher, more melodic presence. Initially, I was least impressed with Leanne, if only because her huskier delivery didn't always feel as vibrant or bright, but then on A.D.I.D.A.S, she actually dropped into a pretty decent Nicki Minaj-esque flow that wasn't bad at all. Hell, if she wanted to play more to that hip-hop role for a US crossover, well, I wouldn't be against it. What's all the most important is that Little Mix have great voices, the entire group. They can handle layered harmonies and can deliver with a lot of convincing, even raw passion. Yeah, sure, there's some moments on this album that can feel kind of plastic, but not because of any of the girls. That was one of the reasons I hope they would go more for R&B. They've got the voices for it, but you know what? The layered pop harmonies really do them a lot of credit. And in a nice change of pace, the arrangements are very democratic, allowing all the girls a chance in the spotlight and not really favoring one over any of the others, which I really appreciated. And you know, a fair amount of the lyrics, they work for me too, primarily because they nail the boundary between being clean enough for the mainstream radio while still having that sexual undertone if you listen closely. Sexy without needing to be explicit, which is one of the reasons why Black Magic remained a ton of fun for me in a pop vein. Taking the traditional metaphor of female sexuality as black magic, which is really an outdated and kind of insulting metaphor, but then playing it so broad and colorful that I don't see any menace to it. It really is a fun song. Apparently the girls actually wanted to make this album even more more explicit, but I'm actually okay with the choice not to go in that direction. Most because tracks like Love Me Like You, A.D.I.D.A.S, which means All Day I Dream About Sex, and the more abstract Lightning do play a little bit more in that more sexual vein. What did throw me a little bit was how much of this album focuses on breakups or failing attempts at relationships. Hair, Grown, I Love You, OMG, Love Me or Leave Me, The End, a full half of this album. And while they're convincing on these songs, these girls, they don't quite have the same momentum as the brighter, more energetic tracks that open up the album. The writing is good, but not quite great to really elevate them. Granted, there's not a song on Get Weird that's better than Competition, and there are some lyrical flubs in the technical writing that's kind of hard for me to ignore. And that's where we get to the tracks that just don't stick as well as I wanted them to. I get the wish fulfillment of OMG and Hair playing in the makeover makes everything better template, but they do feel a little shallow, at least to me. As does Grown, where you can tell that Jess Glenn's lyrical cadence really came into the writing. It sounds quite good, but referring to being grown is just an awkward way to describe adulthood. Didn't really work for me. Then there's the duet with Jason Derulo, Secret Love Song, which did really feel heartfelt and sweet, but I never really got a sense why the relationship had to be a secret. I mean, I get the drama, but the stakes felt a little bit shaky, especially considering that the girls were cheating to be with Jason Derulo, which really didn't strike me as all that good. But now we have to get to the biggest issue of this album, the one that crops up every single damn time I talk about a psycho music album: the production. And you know what? To their credit, it's not universally bad as it is inconsistent. The opening tracks, from the rollick of the guitars on Black Magic to the soulful touches of bells on Love Me Like You to the B-52s-esque flash of the synths and guitars on Weird People Against That Talk Box, they had the sort of colorful pop vibe that reminded me a lot of S Club 7's more infectious melodies in a really good way. But then we hit Secret Love Song, and I'm sorry, there's no excuse why the auto-tune had to be spread onto the girls' voices as well as Jason Derulo's. They don't need it as much as he does. But that's only a signal of how large chunks of this record will fall into very modern, very conventional pop R&B templates. Stripped back snaps and claps for production with heavier bass, weedy melodies pushed towards the back, and most of the instrumentation and production feeling way too underweight to match all these vocal harmonies. These girls have a lot of presence and the instrumentation doesn't really back them up. I don't like the fake horns on songs like Hair or Grown, but at least they're trying to balance out a little bit, even if they do feel awkward. Same with the Latin chorus and the bombastic symphonic strings on Lightning with that stormy vibe, even if it all doesn't fit with that pitched up vocal snippet and that oily synth hook that really didn't belong there. Hell, if this album wanted to go for more of that vintage pop feel like on A.D.I.D.A.S with the bass and the dancing piano line, I actually think Little Mix would be a fine fit for it. After all, unlike someone in that vein like Meghan Trainor, Little Mix don't sound like they need sex explained to them. They are actually convincing on that song. But unfortunately, the weaknesses in the slightly compressed vocals and the chintzy production on Hair and OMG, especially in the weedy synths or the very DJ Mustard / Charlie XCX style of the latter, they do show the unfortunate hallmarks of a group chasing another sound when they should be defining their own lane. It's their third album at this point. And you know what? It's more clear than ever that Little Mix should be fighting for more artistic control, because not only are they more talented than their production shows off, the choice to go towards pop doesn't really play to their strengths, and especially not in the mainstream right now, especially if you're not going to give them a budget for better producers. So you know, in the end, I did really like this album, but outside their vocals, this album doesn't really show Little Mix progressing as a group, and I can't blame them for that. They didn't produce this album, and if Simon Cowell refuses to give them a budget, there's not really much more they can do beyond write more songs, develop their talents, and further hone their techniques until their contracts expire. But then again, there's a lot of potential and talent here that does shine through on some really great pop songs. So for me, it's a 7 out of 10, and definitely a recommendation. If you're a fan of pop girl groups or even decent pop music, this is definitely one you want to be following, because even if they haven't had that major push stateside yet, they're still better. So definitely check them out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out you want me to take a look at, I will try to give them a listen. It's going to be a busy week. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.